Let's return now to our top story, the battle to push Daesh out of Mosul in Iraq. Mark Kagan is president of Panoptes Intelligence, a US-based consultancy firm that provides intelligence on US defense. Joining me live from Washington, D.C. Many thanks for joining us, Mark. How would you say the battle to push Daesh out of Mosul is progressing? We're now 3 weeks into that fight.
I'd say it's progressing about as well as we would have expected. The Daesh forces have had almost 2 years to prepare for an attack like this, and the city is very spread out, very congested, an urban area, and those are never the conditions for a quick and easy victory, especially when the forces of Daesh are embedded within the civilian population, and the attacking forces are trying to minimize civilian casualties as much as possible.
It seems to me that the coalition forces do have the upper hand, though. Presumably Daesh will know this. What do you expect their strategy to be now? Will they continue to hold firm to the bitter end, or will they flee?
No, most of them will hold firm to the bitter end. There have been various intelligence reports over the past week or two about some Daesh commanders and their families fleeing the city, which is a practice that they've done in the past. But for the overwhelming majority of the fighters, they're there to fight until the end, and they will fight until killed. I doubt that very many Daesh prisoners will be taken by the coalition forces, except if they're so badly wounded that they can't kill themselves or blow themselves up in the fighting. If you want to look for analogies, I would go to, say, when the United States fought in the Battle of Okinawa during World War II, and I believe there were about 130,000 Japanese forces on the island when the invasion started, and only a few hundred were captured alive by the end of the battle. I can expect that the same thing will happen here, although the proportion of the forces is on a much smaller scale. There's an estimated 6,000 Daesh fighters here and an estimated 30,000 coalition forces, but it's still a 5-to-1 ratio, which is much more than you would need in an attack of this sort. But again, it's a large, congested urban area, a lot of alleys. It's not like Paris with long, broad avenues and a grid system. It's going to be a very bitter fighting house to house, and they've had time to prepare. And it's not only on the streets, but it's also they've dug tunnels underneath. And you may think that you've captured an area, and then just when you're not expecting it, someone's going to pop out of a tunnel behind you. So they're going to have to be watching that at all times.
There is a lot of concern about what will happen in Daesh, in Mosul, once Daesh is pushed out. As of now, there's no clear political strategy as to who is going to take over. And now with the Shia involvement, militia involvement, there's concern about what will happen to the Sunni residents of Mosul. Do you think the US have thought enough about what is going to happen in Mosul post-Daesh?
I hope so, because we have an unfortunately long history of not looking into this or not preparing for this during our stay in Iraq since 2003. A major problem here is that, unlike after 2003, when we totally botched the job because we did not prepare, as much as we may prepare here, we still have to work with the Iraqi government in Baghdad, and they may have very different objectives or preparations from what the U.S. coalition command may have. To date, I have not seen enough indications, in my opinion, that they really have planned for post-expulsion of Daesh from Mosul, and I'm really worried about how things could deteriorate after that, even if they kill every last fighter, which is not a given, since at least some of them may simply shave off their beards, put on Western clothing, and melt into the population until they can find targets of opportunity later in the day.
That is indeed a big worry, isn't it? Let's talk about Raqqa in Syria, another big Daesh stronghold. We heard today from the Syrian Democratic Forces saying that they're going to move on Raqqa with the support of the US. What do you make of the timing of this move? Does it have something to do with how things are progressing in Mosul? And also, how is the US going to balance Turkey's needs in all this? Because they have, of course, raised many times their concern about the YPG involvement in that fight.
Well, I think with the Syrian Democratic Forces, it's an opportunity for them. They're having major military pressure on the Daesh forces in Mosul. So this is the perfect timing for them to launch an attack on Raqqa, which is the capital of the so-called caliphate. The Daesh forces are going to be splitting their efforts and splitting their attention between these two fairly widely separated areas. So it's tactically and strategically, it's an excellent time to be launching an attack on an area which, though it's much smaller than Mosul, the estimated population of Raqqa is about 200,000 and the population of Mosul is about 1 million. If you want to put the most pressure on Daesh, this would be the time. I would think that the U.S. forces or coalition forces command in the Middle East would have been at least aware that this was going on, because it takes time and preparation for launching such an attack. However, I think it's more a matter of opportunity. If the attack on Mosul hadn't gone through, they wouldn't have been launching the attack on Raqqa now. As for the U.S. and Turkey, the U.S. is, as usual, balancing different objectives and priorities at the same time, which are often in conflict with each other. And this is the perfect case, and not surprisingly, when it comes to the Middle East, this is the perfect case of conflicting priorities, where the U.S. wants to at least degrade, if not defeat, and eliminate Daesh, but it has to use forces that are in the area. Otherwise, the U.S. would have to put its own troops in the area, which the U.S. government has shown no interest in doing, and neither has either of the two candidates who are running for election for president in the United States. And at the same time, you have Turkey, which doesn't want the Kurdish troops in Syria to be involved with this, because the Turkish government sees them as aligned, if not allied, with Kurdish opposition in Turkey. This despite the fact that the Turkish government has very good relations with the Kurdish government in northern Iraq, which again shows how we have the conflicting priorities and objectives in the Middle East. So it's a balancing act. It may not work out, but the U.S. has basically said this is how we're going to go, because our stronger, bigger, more important objective and priority is to kick out Daesh from Raqqa.
A tough one for the U.S., definitely. Mark, really appreciate your time and your thoughts. Mark Kagan, president of Panoptes Intelligence, joining me there live from Washington.